Some More Better by I_am_Ellie on AU3. Episode 60, Chapter 13, Dread. Sometimes Shouta could wake up, and he could already tell it was going to be a horrible day, or a horrible week, or a horrible month. It wasn't often enough, or consistent enough for him to be able to pinpoint the feeling. A sense of foreboding as he drank his coffee in the morning, dread weighing heavy on his limbs as he tried to drag himself out of bed. The usual prickle of anxiety in his stomach, mixing and melting into something else, something worse. Ignored until the very last moment when everything went wrong and he just knew. It didn't happen every time. It hadn't happened when his father left, nor his mother. It had happened the day Izuku came to live with him, but not the day that Inko had died. It'd been there the night the strength villain had crushed his knee in the warehouse, but on the mission that had left the C-shaped scar between his collarbones and had left Hizashi deaf, he felt nothing but pre-mission jitters. The first spot of discomfort, the first sense of wrongness that had begun to hang heavy in Shota's heart, had been when Izuku's friend, acquaintance, nemesis, who knows, really, had stopped sending his usual letters. Izuku had been upset for 2 weeks straight, practically tackling Hizashi every time he came back from the post office, when he didn't insist that he go himself. For those 2 weeks, the tight feeling of dread and nervousness had never ceased, only growing worse when his work at UA finally started again. And being anxious and absent-minded was not a good thing, especially when training a group of mutant teenagers. It had been like a strain of twine being pulled tighter and tighter, just waiting to snap. On his first day of work, Izuku's first day of school, Nezu had called him back into his office to exclaim his duties as Gran Torino's teaching assistant, which, honestly, what? When had he agreed to this? First thing Nezu had done upon his entry to the room was pull out a thick strand of papers and a blue-capped pen. Shouta stared at the papers, a faint sense of horror making itself known as he sat down across from Nezu. His boss just smiled at him with that ever-present sickly sweet grin. Before you begin your first day of work, Nezu stated evenly, for legal purposes, I must ask you to submit a physical, a drug test, a few background checks, and a mental health evaluation. These are the papers to sort out that business. He waved a hand at the rather imposing stack of papers already on his desk. And this, he said, pulling out an even thicker stack, are NDAs. I would recommend signing these first. Mental health evaluation? Should have prompted, movements feeling a bit stiff as he pulled the first sheet from the NDA pile towards himself. He scratched out a signature, writing scratchy and jerky before pushing the paper away and grabbing another. What does that entail? A standard meeting with a therapist, Nezu stated. He took a sip from his teacup in his paw. Just to make sure you won't be a danger to yourself or anyone, we check everyone on staff yearly, especially those who have backgrounds in heroics. You didn't have a therapist last year, Shouta said, frowning. He scribbled on another NDA sheet. There were quite a few. Shouta wasn't sure if he would be able to get through all the paperwork before lunch. It's a new development, Nezu informed him. He's really a guidance counselor, but he has a degree in psychology. He prefers to go by Hound Dog in a professional setting. You may have heard of him before. Shouta frowned, thinking back. It was hard to put a face to the name. Sometimes. Hound Dog. Hound Dog. Ah. I've encountered him in the field before, Shouta stated. He shifted in his seat, crossing a leg over his knee, and holding the pen just a little tighter. Another scribble on another piece of paper. After so much signing, it didn't look like his signatures anymore. It was funny how that worked. He isn't a big hero, but he's respected in his field, in counseling and hero work. I'm sure that this arrangement will go well, smoothly. And if anything comes up in this evaluation? Shouta asked. Nezu pushed another paper towards him. Another scribble, another paper, another scribble. Shouta wasn't naive. He knew he had certain symptoms of problems. He's heard the hushed conversations between Nemuri and Hizashi, ending abruptly whenever he walked into the room. After his mother and father died, after Inko, after he injured his knee out in the field, and his nightmares had increased tenfold. Whispers of anxiety and post-traumatic stress. He knew there was a chance that he could suffer from those things. In the end, he would more than prefer to ignore it and hope it would fix itself on its own, no matter how foolish that thinking may be. But he wasn't ignorant enough to not acknowledge the fact that the possibility was likely. His left hand tapped a nervous pattern on the table, while his right scribbled away on a piece of paper. Another paper, another. Nezu took a sip from his reddish tea. After the entrance exam, when Nezu had informed him that he failed the practical portion, he had a cup of tea too. Shouta, a mere 14-year-old, and still with the imagination of a much younger child, had been convinced that the reddish liquid in the cup was blood. Even now, he wasn't quite sure. After you're done with the paperwork, I want you to go home. Nezu continued. Shota's hand faltered, blue ink bleeding onto the paper. He frowned at Nezu. His boss simply took another long drink from his teacup. Well, after your physical, of course. Not the evaluation. He couldn't help but leave out the mental health part. He could ignore it a little while longer. Oh, goodness. No, not today, Nezu said, waving a paw dismissively. It's the beginning of the year, so Hound Dog's schedule will be backed up for at least 2 weeks. It's the beginning of the year, so Hound Dog's schedule will be backed up for at least 2 weeks. I'm afraid you won't be able to work with the Hero Course students in the gym or in any kind of combat-related training, but there's really no rush. So, you have all 2 weeks to panic. The rat-like creature grinned at him. Shouta blinked. He wasn't sure how to respond to that, however accurate it may have been. I see, he decided. Should he thank him? He felt distantly thankful. Thanking him would probably be appropriate. Thank you. His words never came out right. Oh, it's no problem, Eraser, Nezu said easily, a pleasant, though slightly fixed, grin back on his face. And why do I need to go back home after the physical? Oh, you'll be so busy with all this paperwork, and Torino really doesn't give his students much work in the first week anyways, so I'm sure you won't be missed. And you want to rest before your patrol tonight, I imagined. That much was true. He supposed he shouldn't waste an opportunity to catch up on sleep. Not when it was right in front of him. And it seems you're done with the NDA forms. Shouta looked down, and indeed, sometime in the rather baffling conversation, he had managed to make it through the rest of the first stack of papers. At least, the other stack was less imposing. The paperwork for his physical and drug tests were on the top of the stack. All the standard questions. His name, his age, birthday, and height. He had been informed at his last doctor's appointment of his height, though he wasn't quite sure what to put under the weight space on the paper. He suspected Recovery Girl would have him stand on a scale anyhow, and yell at him for not eating enough, but that was practically inedible. Maybe I could put rocks in my pockets, Shouta thought idly, as he hurried to fiddle out the rest of the paperwork. Nezu was still slipping his tea across the desk, humming idly, and staring at him. It made something tight build up in his chest, a nervous energy. But then, Nezu always made him nervous, simply because of the fact that the rat, dog, creature was probably one of the most powerful beings he would ever meet in his life. How's the little one doing? Nezu asked. Shouta was on his last form, so close to freedom. Shouta felt like if Nezu kept trying to engage him in conversation, he would end up saying something stupid. Izuku, he's not okay? Sad? Worried? Lonely? Back in therapy? Having nightmares every night? Doing well. Nezu hummed, and it sounded a bit skeptical. Shouta glanced up at his boss. He could never figure out what he was thinking, behind the small smiles and the soft, floatery voice. And that was, perhaps, more terrifying than the fact that Nezu could ruin his life in less than 5 minutes and not bat an eyelash. If he needs any additional support, Nezu said airily, pouring himself another cup of reddish tea. He placed 5 sugar cubes into the drink, and Shouta found himself wondering how Nezu was still alive, and stirred it up in a small spoon. Yue will be here. Shouta blinked in disbelief for what felt like the 10th time since he entered Nezu's office. Thank you, sir. Shouta finally stated, trying his best to keep his voice stilted. Instead, it came out tight, like he was angry. Shouta quickly pushed aside the familiar frustration that was building up in its way, because why couldn't he just say what he meant? Nezu once again waved a paw dismissively. He took another sip from the overly sugared concentration in his cup before placing it back onto the table and dabbing his face with a red cloth napkin. I see you're done with your paperwork, Nezu noticed, sounding pleasantly surprised, though Shouta was sure he must have been working for over an hour at that point. I'll call Recovery Girl and let her know you're on your way down. Nezu nodded, slowly rising up from his chair, Injured E, protesting slightly, because he was not supposed to sit down for that long of a time, and grabbed his paperwork, quick to make his way out of the office. Now to get the physical over with. He walked into Recovery Girl's office. There was a soft piano music playing from the small piano at her desk. It was like elevator music, probably meant to calm her patients, and more likely to help keep Recovery Girl's blood pressure down. Shouta was well aware that Recovery Girl was a sweet, kind woman, but the amount of time she had yelled at him, Hizashi, and Nemuri put together for foolish injuries was daunting. Chiro looked up as soon as he stepped into the office, wasting no time to usher him over to the small bed in the corner. There was another child, one with tan skin, dark brown freckles, and short, dyed blue dreadlocks, holding an ice pack to a bruised eye. On his cheek was a long laceration that Shouta was sure would need stitches. The boy looked utterly miserable. Just a second, Aizawa. I have to get some butterfly bandages for young Sokao here. And she trailed off, blinding out of the room, cane against the marble floor as she went. Who the hell are you? The boy, Shukao, asked. Another drop of blood dripped down his cheek and onto his jaw. The boy wiped it away roughly, with an agitated expression on his face. Shouta Aizawa. Shouta said, turning away from the boy to stare at the wall. Or should he face him head on, make a good impression? He would be a teacher, of sorts, soon enough. For all he knew, this could be one of his students. You a janitor or something? He asked. The ice pack in his hand shifted slightly, pressing closer to the bruises. Whoever had clocked the kid in the face hadn't held back. Teaching assistant, Shouta replied. He wasn't sure he wanted to talk to this boy. What was taking Shigo so long? I'm working with Gran Torino. I'm one of his students, he said, grinning meaningly. His front teeth was chipped. I'm Shinsou. I guess I'll be seeing you soon then, huh? There was something very off-putting about this child. Chio chose that moment to come bustling back into the room. All right, Shouko, let's get you taken care of. She puts the butterfly bandages on either side of the cut on Shin's face, squeezing the wound closed and waiting for it to stop bleeding. Then she pressed a kiss to the boy's forehead. Shin grimaced uncomfortably all the while, and when she stepped back, the bruise and cut were noticeably absent. Run along now, dearie, and don't train so hard. Shin nodded, heading towards the door and throwing one more odd look at Shouta on his way out. Chiyo hissed. Poor boy, she said. She walked over to Shouta, tying up his arm with a blue band until a vein popped out and jabbing a needle in it. Shouta winced. Don't know what to do with that child sometimes. He just never listens to sense. Always getting into scuffles with those other boys. She hissed again, pulling the needle out and pressing a cotton ball onto his arm. All right, lay down. Shouta laid down on the bed, and Chiyo grabbed his foot, bending it this way and that, occasionally asking, Any pain? How about now? Any major injuries in the past year or so? Any surgeries? Concussions? All too many. My knee. Shouta noted. No concussions, as far as I know. She made him unzip the shirt of his uniform, pressed down to his abdomen, liver, kidneys, stomach. Then she had him sit up, pressing a stethoscope to his back, and listening to him breathe for a few moments. She felt along his spine, and then bent his arm and had him roll his shoulders. Any pain? She asked again, and Shouta shook his head. You need to be taking more precaution out in the field. There's no reason for you to have so many scars. Chiyo scolded. Shouta didn't bother telling her that half of the scars he collected over the years came from his training at UA. She grabbed his arm again to check his wrist, faltering slightly as she did. What's this? She asked, tapping the patched, cold, pale skin on his forearm, still in the shape of a broad handprint. Side effects of a villain's quirk, Shouta explained. It basically cuts off a bit of oxygen and blood flow to the area. Not enough to be deadly, and nothing I needed to be worried about, but it'll probably be there for the rest of my life. He couldn't help but feel a bit sad saying it, even though he wasn't sure why. It wasn't like it hindered him in any way, but sometimes it was better not to have physical reminders of a bad mission. Chiyo glared at him disapprovingly. Well, I only have to check your blood pressure and your glucose, and then you could go home, she said. She grabbed a small white contraption, put it under his hand, squeezed his fingers until it was red, and pushed a button that caused a stinging, stabbing sort of pain to erupt from her finger. Shouta jumped. Chiyo took another small machine, put some sort of strip into the top of it, and held it to the small spot of blood that was bending up on the pad of his fingers. Why she needed more blood after just drawing some, he will never understand. After she put a cuff over his arm for a moment, the painful tingliness of which was probably more irritating than all the needles, she gave him a lollipop, a kiss on the forehead, and sent him on his way. He didn't have anything to do other than to go home. He had the keys, and Nemuri could always drop Hizashi off after school. Their apartment was on her way home. He drove home, hands white-knuckled on his steering wheel, because the feeling of dread and wrongness was still there. But he got home safely. He locked the door to the apartment, set an alarm for when he would have to pick up Izuku from school, put the dishes away because Hizashi had asked him to do that the night before, and he still hadn't done it, before flopping back onto the couch and staring at the ceiling. Takara slept on his chest, and Akio curled up directly under his neck. Instead of sleeping, his mind found himself thinking about the popgourd ceiling, because he always had trouble falling asleep when he was actually supposed to be sleeping. In the summer, after second year, months after he and Hizashi had started dating, Dan and Hana Yamada had decided they wanted to remodel their home and had asked for he and Nemuri's help. He ended up scrabbling and sanding every ceiling in the house down until the rough texture was smooth. It had smelled horrible, like wet chalk and Windex, and the falling chunks of ceiling had kicked up such a great cloud of dust every time they fell that Shouta, who hadn't been given a cloth mask, since Nemuri and Hizashi had both been given the last ones, had almost thrown up. He made 10,000 yen, though, He'd been able to buy groceries that week, and Takara had no shortage of tuna for at least a month afterwards. Shouta's thinking had shifted to groceries and how stocked the cupboards were, making a mental list of everything they would need for the market that weekend. Lunch meat, milk, definitely bread. They'd need more blueberries, too. Izuku had taken a liking to them, and the container in the fridge was almost empty. The alarm buzzed bailingly, and Shouta hadn't even realized that at least 2.5 hours have melted away. He tapped on the screen on his phone until the horrible sound stopped before dragging himself off of the couch. He quickly changed into a pair of sweatpants, a gray t-shirt, and flip-flops, shoving his hero uniform into a plastic garbage bag along with the dirty laundry from everyone else's bedrooms and the bathroom. He had enough time to stop by the laundromat after he picked Izuku from school, something Hizashi had also been asking Shouta to take care of. He tossed the bag into the floorboard of the passenger seat, driving down the main road towards Izuku's school. There was always traffic at this time of day, cars moving at a snail's pace, and men in orange jumpsuits with red stop signs directing everyone on where to go and how to turn. Once he reached Izuku's school, it was already 3:45, and Izuku was standing outside of the school on the sidewalk, with the blonde-headed boy, Denki, and a brown-haired girl he couldn't quite remember the name of. Ochako? Ochako. Denki and Izuku were talking while Ochako stood to the side, looking a bit glum and leaning back and forth on her heels. He stopped in front of them, rolling down the window. Izuku hugged both Ochako and Denki before opening the back door and practically leaping into his car seat. "Hey, Unky!" Izuku exclaimed cheerily. "Hello, child," Shouta said, pulling the car in drive and pulling out of the school. Now for the laundromat. Then he could go home and watch a movie or two with Sashi and Izuku before patrol. "You're in a good mood." A good mood was a bit of an understatement. The child was practically buzzing with excitement. It was a nice change of pace, compared to the cloud of anxiety that had seemed to follow him the last couple weeks. "Mm-hmm," he replied cheerily, feet kicking back and forth in the back seat. "Where are we going?" "Laundry," Shouta said simply. He turned on his blinker and turned onto a narrow strip of traffic, only just missing a car that was trying to speed outwards. Nemuri or Hizashi would have flipped the driver off, ranted and raved until they were blue in the face. Shouta just exhaled shakily, grip on the steering wheel tightening. He hated traffic. Izuku, at the very least, didn't seem to have noticed. He was still happily kicking his feet in the back seat. Traffic seemed to be speeding up, at least. That was something. Alright, okay. So, Dread. What do you think is gonna happen? I'm gonna read ahead a little bit. Hold up, we're here. And I'm gonna go down. Is this what I think it is? Where is it? Where is it? Oh, I just heard something happen outside with Echo Bro. It just ends with a letter. Okay, well, it's not what I thought was gonna end with. Because I think I know what it ends with, and I do not like it. I have this one plot point that hasn't happened yet. And I'm not sure if it has happened because I don't remember certain things. Like, I don't remember everything that's happened so far, right? Everything after, like, what's it called? Chapter 12, like, is that where I left off? Like, did I make up that one, what's it called? Plot point? Is that one plot point just something that was made up in my mind? Did I bamboozle myself? Did I gaslit myself into thinking that this one plot point happened? Because the plot point hasn't happened, and we're reaching towards the middle of where this fanfiction has left off at. And you would think the plot point, that specific plot point, which would be such a huge plot point, would pop up already, but it hasn't. And you know what? I'm starting to think that I gaslit myself into thinking that's a plot point. And I'm starting to realize that it's not a plot point. If you're hearing the sprinkle of my spray, because I'm spraying water all over myself, specifically like my face and my neck and stuff, it's, look, the air conditioning works amazing. in every room but mine. Yeah, no, the air conditioning over here sucks. So my room is the coldest and the hottest, right? It's obviously way better than if I went outside. Like, outside is fucking burning. Like, it's 100-degree weather right now, but, still not, you know. Well, all the other rooms are like a good 70, 60. Mine is probably like an 80, 90. Again, not that bad compared to 100 degrees, but still not the best. But I wonder if I just made myself think that plot point happened. And if so, well, fuck. You know? Anyways, as always, my raindrops, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Have a wonderful day or night. Link to my Discord server and socials are down in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.